A billionaire discovers his ex-wife at a Christmas gala with twin daughters who share his hazel eyes, forcing him to confront the family he never knew he had. Before we continue with the story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Oh, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. We love seeing that. Marvin Smith adjusted his platinum cufflinks as he surveyed the glittering Christmas charity gala from the balcony of the Grand Meridian Ballroom. At 40, he controlled Smith & Associates, a global finance empire worth billions. The Forbes profile called him the most calculating mind in investment banking. Everything in his life followed a precise formula. Everything made sense on a spreadsheet, except tonight felt strangely hollow. Mr. Smith, his executive assistant, approached quietly. The Rothschild representatives are asking for you at table 7. Marvin nodded, straightening his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. Another handshake, another deal. This was the life he'd built after Evelyn left. Clean, controlled, profitable. As he descended the marble staircase, his eyes swept the crowd of designer gowns and champagne flutes. Then he saw her, Evelyn Lopez. 6 years disappeared in an instant. She stood near the towering Christmas tree, laughing at something. Then, 2 small figures in matching velvet dresses stepped into view. Twin girls, maybe 6 years old. Marvin's breath caught. They turned toward him, and he saw his own hazel eyes staring back. Marvin did not remember crossing the ballroom. One moment he was frozen at the foot of the staircase, staring at 2 pairs of hazel eyes that should not exist, and the next he was moving through the tide of sequins and tuxedos, champagne flutes, tilting as people stepped aside. Holiday music swelled from the string quartet, some polished carol about joy and peace, entirely at odds with the roar building in his chest. Evelyn turned before he reached her, as if she had felt him coming. For a split second, the years fell away. He saw the woman who used to study briefs at his kitchen table, hair twisted into a messy knot, laughing when he stole her highlighters. Then the memory shattered under the hard set of her mouth. Marvin. His name was neither greeting nor question, just a fact. Up close, the twins were smaller than he had imagined, all big eyes and soft curls, the velvet of their dresses catching the gold light from the enormous tree behind them. One girl clutched a candy cane. The other twisted the satin ribbon of her program. Both studied him with open curiosity. Evelyn, we need to talk. His voice came out rough, unfamiliar. Her gaze flicked to the businessmen watching from across the room, then to the hovering event photographer. Not here, she said quietly. Barbara, Sarah, go stand with Mrs. Patel by the dessert table. I'll be right there. The girls obeyed, though one looked back over her shoulder at him, those uncanny hazel eyes narrowing as if trying to place him. When they were out of earshot, Evelyn drew in a breath. Follow me. You have 60 seconds before someone notices this isn't small talk. They slipped through the crowd to the far side of the ballroom, where a smaller alcove opened onto a quieter lounge. A sprig of mistletoe hung from the carved archway, part of the decorator's obsessive commitment to Christmas cheer. Marvin almost laughed at the absurdity of it. A tradition meant for giggles and kisses, now hanging over what felt like the sharp edge of his life. Evelyn stopped beneath it, crossed her arms, and waited. Are they mine? The words ripped out of him. No preamble, no pleasantries. He did not have room for them. Her eyes flashed, straight to the point, very on-brand. Eve. His throat tightened around the old nickname. Answer me. She looked past him toward the ballroom, watching the twins weave between adults, little islands of white and red in a sea of black. When she spoke, her voice had lost its edge. Yes, they're yours. Barbara and Sarah Smith, whether you sign a piece of paper or not. The floor dropped away. Air thinned. All the numbers he understood instinctively. Markets, valuations, percentages dissolved into meaningless fragments against the simple arithmetic of their ages. 6, he said hoarsely. They're 6, she nodded once. You knew, he whispered. You knew and you didn't tell me. Evelyn's jaw clenched. I tried, Marvin. I called. I emailed. I came to your office. Do you remember what your mother told me the last time I showed up? His stomach turned cold. What are you talking about? She invited me to her townhouse, Evelyn said, sat me down in that museum of a sitting room, handed me tea I was too nauseous to drink, and explained very calmly that your future could not include a lawyer wife with twins on her hip. She had a check already written, enough to cover my inconvenience and start over somewhere far from your precious circle. That's not possible, he said. But the protest sounded weak even to him. Eleanor always planned 5 moves ahead. Of course, she would have seen an unexpected pregnancy as a threat to mitigate. I tore the check in half and left it on her antique rug, Evelyn went on. She told me you were busy with a merger, that you didn't want to be disturbed, that if you had really wanted children, you would have said so before the divorce papers were signed. His ears rang. Images collided. His mother's tight smile the week the divorce finalized, the way she had insisted on handling all communication so he could focus on rebuilding his reputation, the vague mentions of Evelyn moving on, that he'd accepted without question. You believed her? He asked, the question more accusation toward himself than her. What choice did I have? Evelyn's voice cracked, then steadied. You never called. Months went by. My emails bounced from your assistant. I was pregnant, Marvin, alone, and apparently, I was an embarrassment your family preferred to erase. He pressed his hand against the wall to anchor himself. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. For a heartbeat, something vulnerable flickered in her eyes, as if she were weighing the man in front of her against the ghost she had been hating for 6 long years. Then her defenses slammed back into place. Maybe you didn't, she said. But you built a life that made it very easy not to know. The mistletoe swayed slightly above them as a draft slipped through from the main hall. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly. A bell chimed from the band stage. I missed everything, he murmured. First steps, first words, birthdays, school plays, an entire life he had traded away without even realizing it was on the table. You missed a lot, Evelyn agreed. And they've done just fine without you. He flinched. Let me fix this. You can't fix 6 years in one night. She stepped back, out from under the mistletoe. I brought them because this gala supports their school, not to hand you a ready-made family like another acquisition. Evelyn, our conversation is over, she said softly. For tonight. She turned away, heading back toward the lights and the music and the 2 little girls waiting for her. Marvin watched as Barbara wrapped her arms around Evelyn's waist, as Sarah tugged at her sleeve to point out the dessert table. Evelyn bent to listen, her face softening in a way he had not seen in years. He should have followed. He should have demanded another minute, begged if he had to. Instead, Marvin found himself moving in the opposite direction, toward the cloakroom and the exit, each step heavier than the last. Deals could be salvaged, fortunes rebuilt, reputations repaired, but there was no spreadsheet in the world that could calculate the cost of 6 lost Christmases. Marvin did not sleep. He drove through the empty city streets until the sky turned from black to bruised purple, then gray, then the cold blue of dawn. By the time he pulled up to his mother's estate in Greenwich, frost clung to the perfectly manicured hedges and his hands had gone numb on the steering wheel. Eleanor Smith did not believe in being unprepared for guests, even at 6 in the morning. When the housekeeper opened the door, his mother was already dressed in a cashmere sweater set in pearls, seated in the sunroom, with the Wall Street Journal folded beside her untouched grapefruit. Marvin. She set down her coffee cup with a precise click. You look terrible. I assume this is about the Lopez woman. He had rehearsed a dozen opening lines during the drive. All of them evaporated. You knew, he said. You knew about the twins, and you hid them from me. Eleanor's expression did not change. I protected you from a complication that would have derailed your future. You were already hemorrhaging assets in the divorce. Adding children to that equation would have been catastrophic. Catastrophic. He repeated the words slowly, as if tasting poison. My daughters. You're calling my daughters catastrophic. They were a liability at the time. She corrected, brushing an invisible piece of lint from her sleeve. You were barely holding the company together. The board was circling. A pregnancy scandal with your ex-wife would have finished you. Marvin stepped closer, his voice dropping to something cold and unfamiliar. You wrote her a check, tried to pay her off like she was some kind of problem to solve, which she refused, Eleanor said. Quite dramatically, I might add. Tore it in half and left it on my Persian rug. I had it cleaned the next day. The casualness of it broke something in him. 6 years of his children's lives, reduced to an anecdote about carpet maintenance. "You had no right," he said. "I had every right." Eleanor finally looked at him, her pale eyes sharp. "I built this family's legacy long before you were born. Your grandfather's money, your father's indiscretions, the business deals that should have destroyed us but didn't, because I handled them. You think you earned Smith and Associates on your own merit? You inherited a machine I spent 40 years perfecting. My job was to keep it running. That included protecting you from yourself, from my own children, from sentimentality," she snapped, "from the same weakness that made your father abandon perfectly sound mergers, because he got distracted by pretty secretaries and guilty conscience. You were on track to eclipse everything this family had ever accomplished. I was not going to let Evelyn Lopez and her unfortunate timing ruin that." Marvin felt the rage drain out of him, replaced by something worse. Clarity. She was not wrong about the machine. He had let her run interference on his personal life for years. Screening calls, managing his social calendar, ensuring his public image stayed immaculate. He had been grateful for it once, the freedom to focus on deals while she handled everything else. He had handed her the controls, and she had used them exactly as he should have expected. "You're right," he said quietly. "I let this happen." Eleanor relaxed slightly, mistaking his tone for agreement. "Then we understand each other. Whatever arrangement you want to make with the Lopez woman now, we can negotiate terms. Financial support, visitation schedules, a discreet paternity agreement. I have lawyers who specialize in—" "You're done," Marvin interrupted. She blinked. "Excuse me? You're done making decisions for me. You're done managing my life. You're done anywhere near my family. Don't be ridiculous." Eleanor stood, her voice sharpening. "You need me. You've always needed me." "Maybe I did," he said. "But that ends now." He turned toward the door, adrenaline making his hands shake. Eleanor's voice followed him. "If you walk away from this family's standards, you walk away alone. The board will not tolerate instability. Your investors will not tolerate scandal. You will lose everything I built for you." Marvin stopped at the threshold. For 6 years, that threat would have worked. The empire, the legacy, the carefully constructed fortress of wealth and power. Now all he could see were 2 little girls in velvet dresses, sharing his eyes and a childhood he had missed. "Then I lose it," he said. By 8 o'clock, he was back in his office. His chief of staff, Gregory, appeared exactly 2 minutes after Marvin texted him. Punctual as always, tablet already open to the day's schedule. "Cancel everything," Marvin said. "Sir, cancel everything, and then clean out your desk." Gregory's professional mask slipped. "I don't understand." "Closing. You report to my mother," Marvin said flatly. "I know she installed you here. I know you send her daily briefings. That's over. You have until noon. Mr. Smith, if this is about the gala, it's about 6 years of you making sure I never received calls or emails from Evelyn Lopez," Marvin said. "Don't insult me by pretending you didn't know." Gregory opened his mouth, then closed it. He set the tablet down carefully and walked out. Marvin pulled out his phone and dialed Barbara, his assistant, the one person his mother had never managed to replace. "Barbara," he said when she answered. "I need everything. Evelyn Lopez's address, phone number, workplace, her lawyer's contact information, everything." There was a pause. Then Barbara's steady voice came through. "I'll have it to you in 10 minutes, Mr. Smith." "Thank you," he said. "And Barbara, you're promoted to chief of staff, effective immediately." He hung up before she could respond, staring out at the city skyline as the morning light turned the glass towers gold. Somewhere out there, 2 little girls were waking up, brushing their teeth, getting ready for school, and for the first time in 6 years, their father knew they existed. The coffee shop Evelyn chose was deliberately unremarkable. No private rooms, no white tablecloths, no waiters who recognized his name, just worn wooden tables, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the smell of burnt toast. Marvin arrived 15 minutes early and still found her already there, positioned at a corner table with clear sight lines to both exits. She had dressed for battle in her own way. Jeans, a simple sweater, no jewelry except the small gold studs she had worn since college. The lawyer uniform she used to favor had been replaced by something softer, but her posture was all business. "You came," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I came because you wouldn't stop calling," Evelyn said. "Barbara left 4 messages yesterday. Your new lawyer sent a very polite letter. You're persistent when you want something. I want to know my daughters." She took a sip of her coffee, studying him over the rim. "So you fired Gregory? You heard. I hear things." She set the cup down. "Your mother called me last night. Told me you were having some kind of breakdown and that I should ignore any impulsive gestures you might make." Marvin felt his jaw tighten. "What did you say?" I hung up on her. A ghost of a smile crossed Evelyn's face. "Second time I've done that. It gets easier. Despite everything," he almost laughed. Then the weight of why they were sitting here crashed back down. "Eve, I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, like trying to fill a canyon with a teaspoon. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I let my mother run my life. I'm sorry I built a world where you couldn't reach me even when you tried." "You practiced that," she observed. 17 times in the car. It shows." She folded her hands on the table. "But apologies are easy, Marvin. You were always good at saying the right thing when a deal needed closing. I'm not interested in your pitch. Then what do you want? Proof." Her voice hardened. "Not a check. Not some trust fund set up by your lawyers. Not your name on a birth certificate you'll frame and forget about. I want proof that you're willing to show up. Actually show up. For ballet recitals and stomach flus and homework meltdowns. For the boring parts. The inconvenient parts." He leaned forward. "Tell me how." Evelyn studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see past the expensive suit and the rehearsed apology to whatever was left of the man she had once loved. "Limited visits," she finally said. "Supervised. I'm there the whole time, and if I see you checking your phone for stock alerts or taking calls from Tokyo, we're done." "Okay. I mean it, Marvin. One whiff of you treating them like another obligation on your calendar and I will disappear so far into legal protection you'll need a Supreme Court ruling to find us." "I understand." She pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward him. A flyer for the Winter Lights Festival at Riverside Park. Hot chocolate, carousel rides, a Christmas tree maze. "Saturday," she said. 2 o'clock. "Barbara and Sarah have been asking to go for weeks. You can take them. Just me. I'll be 10 feet behind you the entire time," Evelyn said. "But yes, you get to be the one holding their hands, buying the overpriced cocoa, pretending to be scared in the tree maze even though it's designed for 6-year-olds. Marvin looked at the bright, cheerful flyer advertising family fun and felt something close to panic. He had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without breaking a sweat. He had stared down hostile board members and international regulators. But the thought of 2 small girls expecting him to know how to be their father made his chest tighten. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I know," Evelyn said, and for the first time since the gala, her expression softened slightly. "That's actually the first honest thing you've said. What if I mess it up?" "You will mess it up." She slid her phone back into her pocket. "You'll buy the wrong snacks. You'll talk about compound interest when they ask about Santa. You'll probably try to efficiency optimize the carousel line. That doesn't sound encouraging." "It's not meant to be encouraging. It's meant to be real." She stood, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "They're not a business deal, Marvin. They're little girls who don't know you exist outside of Mom's friend from the party. If you want to change that, you're going to have to fail at it a few dozen times first." He rose as well, catching her arm gently before she could leave. "What did you tell them?" "About me?" Evelyn's face went carefully neutral. "I told them you're someone I used to know. Someone who might want to spend time with them if they're interested." "Are they?" "Interested?" She pulled her arm free, but not unkindly. "Barbara asked if you're the man with the fancy car. Sarah asked if you know anything about volcanoes because she's doing a project. So I'd say your first test is to show up with answers neither of them are expecting." "Saturday," he confirmed. 2 o'clock. Riverside Park. "Don't be late," Evelyn said. "And Marvin, don't bring gifts. Don't try to impress them. Just try to meet them." She walked out into the cold morning, leaving him standing beside a table scattered with coffee cups and crumpled napkins. Through the window, he watched her climb into a modest sedan, the kind of car he would have dismissed as forgettable. She had driven that car to his office 6 years ago, pregnant and desperate for answers. His mother had turned her away. His chief of staff had deleted her emails, and he had been too busy building an empire to notice the messages that never reached him. Marvin pulled out his phone and typed a reminder. Saturday, 2 p.m., Riverside Park. Be a father. Then he added a second note. Research volcanoes. It was not much, but it was a start. Riverside Park looked different at child height. Marvin realized this as he watched Barbara and Sarah from a cautious distance, the twins bouncing on their toes while the carousel chimed tinny Christmas music. The Winter Lights Festival glittered around them, twinkling arches, stalls selling hot chocolate, the faint smell of roasted chestnuts he had only ever encountered in advertisements. Can we ride the horses now? Barbara asked, tugging at his sleeve with surprising familiarity for someone who had known him less than 10 minutes. Marvin glanced at the line, then at his watch, then at the VIP pass he had instinctively purchased online. We could go to the front, he offered. There's an express option. Sarah frowned up at him. But then we wouldn't get to see the lights in the line. She pointed to the glowing snowflakes strung overhead, each one changing color slowly. It's like they're breathing. He looked at the decorations he had not noticed once. Right. The lights. They stayed in line. Barbara narrated which carousel animal she wanted. The white horse with the pink saddle, not the dragon. The dragon is too scary but also cool, but mostly scary. While Sarah explained, in careful detail, how real volcanoes formed from tectonic plates and magma, Marvin tried to follow the science and the stream of consciousness at the same time, his brain used to conference calls, not overlapping monologues about lava and glitter. When the carousel finally started, he stood beside their chosen animals like an overqualified security guard, one hand hovering near each girl, ready to catch them though the ride barely moved faster than a slow jog. Barbara threw her head back and laughed every time the horse rose. Sarah held the pole with one hand and pointed at the park skyline with the other, naming constellations she had half learned from a book. He did not understand why this squeaky, circular ride made them glow from the inside out, but he understood that it did. And that had to be enough for now. The test came a week later. He was in the middle of a strategy session, 12 people around the boardroom table, when his phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Barbara's winter showcase, 3 p.m., gymnasium. A second notification from Evelyn followed. She's a snowflake in the second row. Don't be late. The meeting was already running long. A European investor wanted reassurances about a merger. His CFO had flown in from Zurich. The deal was worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. Let's push through the projections for Q3, someone said. We can wrap by 4. For years, he would have nodded automatically. Numbers first, people later. Marvin stared at the spreadsheet on the screen, columns of figures blurring into one another. Then he saw, with uncomfortable clarity, another timeline, one where a little girl in a paper snowflake costume scanned the crowd, looking for a father who had chosen a conference room over her first school performance. No, he said. The room stilled. We're done for today. Marvin continued. You have my notes. Final revisions can be handled by email. Marvin, the Norland Fund expects. The CFO began. They can expect an answer tomorrow, he said. This can wait. My daughter's play cannot. The word daughter slipped out before he could measure it. It tasted strange and right at the same time. He gathered his folder, ignoring the ripple of surprised glances, and walked out before anyone could argue. He arrived at the school gym with 3 minutes to spare, heart pounding harder than it had during any earnings call. The space smelled of crayons and floor polish. Parents crowded the folding chairs, cameras ready. Evelyn sat near the middle, an empty seat beside her. She raised an eyebrow as he slid into it. Slightly out of breath. You came, she murmured. I almost didn't, he answered honestly. But then I did. The curtain opened. A chaotic arrangement of small snowflakes, reindeer, and elves shuffled into place. Barbara stood in the second row, construction paper tiara slipping over one eye, scanning the crowd with anxious intensity. For a heartbeat, Marvin thought she might miss him. Then her gaze locked onto his, and her entire face transformed. She straightened, pushed her tiara back, and gave the kind of electric, unguarded smile no stock market in the world could replicate. Next to him, Sarah whispered. Barbara said, if you came, it means you're serious. About being a dad. Marvin swallowed. And what do you think? Sarah considered this, small brow furrowing in scientist concentration. I think you still don't know how volcanoes work, she said. But you're learning. So maybe you'll learn this too. As Barbara lifted her arms with the rest of the snowflakes, turning in a wobbly circle to a tinny recording of Silent Night, Marvin realized he was watching the most important performance of his life. Not hers, his. He had nearly traded it for a deal. He would remember that every time his phone buzzed during bedtime or homework or another school event. Later, as they walked out into the chilly evening, Barbara skipped between him and Evelyn, holding both their hands. Sarah talked about a new science kit she wanted to build. Seismographs, she said solemnly. They measure shaking. Marvin looked at the two small figures tethering him to the sidewalk, to this ordinary, extraordinary moment, and thought that his entire life was being measured too. The old one, cracking apart, the new one, unsteady and imperfect, beginning with the simple act of showing up. Thursday evenings became sacred. Marvin learned this the way he learned most things now, through trial and careful observation. The twins finished homework around 5. Dinner happened between 6 and 7. By 8, they were negotiating for 15 more minutes before bed. These rhythms, invisible to him 6 weeks ago, now structured his week more firmly than any board meeting. Evelyn's apartment was small. The kind of place he would have dismissed in another life as unremarkable. Beige carpet, a galley kitchen, windows that overlooked a parking lot, but Barbara's drawings covered the refrigerator in magnetic chaos, and Sarah's rock collection lined the windowsill in careful rows, each specimen labeled in shaky handwriting. It was a home. He had forgotten what those looked like. Pepperoni or cheese? He asked. Phone open to the pizza delivery app he had downloaded specifically for these nights. Both, Barbara said from her position on the floor, coloring something that might have been a unicorn or possibly a dinosaur. Half and half. You always forget Sarah doesn't like pepperoni. I like pepperoni, Sarah corrected, not looking up from the book she was reading. I just don't like when the grease makes the cheese slide off. Marvin adjusted the order, adding extra napkins to the notes section. These details mattered. He was learning that slowly. They ate on the couch, paper plates balanced on laps, while an animated movie played on the television. Something about a princess and a dragon and a moral lesson he only half followed because Barbara kept providing director's commentary and Sarah kept fact-checking the medieval architecture. Evelyn sat in the armchair, pretending to read a novel but watching them over the top of the pages. He caught her eye once. She did not smile, but she did not look away either. Progress came in these small, unmeasured increments. The crisis arrived on a Tuesday. Evelyn called him at work, her voice tight with the particular stress only a single mother juggling deadlines understood. Sarah's science fair project is due tomorrow, she said without preamble. The one she's been talking about for 3 weeks, except she just informed me the baking soda volcano she planned isn't real science anymore. Now she wants to build a working seismograph, from scratch. Tonight, Marvin glanced at his computer screen, at the financial models that needed review before the London markets opened. Then he closed the laptop. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Evelyn's kitchen table became mission control. Sarah had printouts from the library, a shoebox, string, a marker, and an alarming amount of duct tape. Her eyes were red-rimmed, the particular desperation of a 6-year-old realizing complexity exceeded ambition. I can't make it work, she whispered. Marvin sat down across from her, rolling up his sleeves. Show me what you have so far. They worked through dinner, through Barbara's bedtime, through the point where Evelyn stopped hovering and started actually helping. The seismograph was, objectively, beyond what a first grader should attempt. But Sarah refused to scale back, and Marvin found himself problem-solving in ways no business degree had prepared him for. How to balance the pendulum. How to keep the paper rolling at a steady rate. How to make the whole contraption sensitive enough to register vibration without falling apart when someone sneezed. Try tapping the table, Sarah instructed at one point, and when he did, the marker jumped, leaving a jagged line on the paper. Her entire face lit up. It's working. We made it work. Somewhere past midnight, Evelyn appeared with coffee she had brewed in her ancient machine. Marvin accepted it gratefully, his expensive shirt wrinkled and marked with ink stains. Sarah had fallen asleep with her head on his arm an hour earlier, her breathing deep and even. "I should move her," he said quietly. In a minute, Evelyn sat down, cradling her own mug. "Let me just look at this." "At what?" "You. Covered in duct tape residue. Staying up past midnight on a work night to build a seismograph." She shook her head. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed it. 6 months ago, neither would I. She studied him in the dim kitchen light, the sharp edges of her distrust starting to soften into something more uncertain. "You fired Gregory. Cut ties with your mother. Walked out of meetings. For them, he confirmed, and maybe for me too. I was building the wrong things." Sarah stirred against his arm, mumbling something about tectonic plates. Marvin adjusted his position carefully so she would not wake. "I'm still angry," Evelyn said. "At you. At the time we lost. At how hard this is. You have every right to be. But I'm also watching you try," she continued. "Really try. Not performing for an audience or trying to win me back with grand gestures. Just showing up with pizza and learning about seismographs and letting Barbara explain the same movie plot 5 different times." "She has notes," Marvin said. "Detailed notes." Evelyn almost smiled. "She does." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind he had forgotten existed. Not the absence of words, but the presence of understanding. The seismograph sat on the table between them, a monument to patience and collaboration, and the strange, terrifying process of becoming the person his daughters needed. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, half asleep. "For helping." Marvin looked down at the small girl tucked against him. Her trust offered so simply, it made his chest ache. "Anytime," he said. "I mean that." Across the table, Evelyn's expression shifted into something he had not seen in 7 years. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first fragile possibility that maybe, eventually, they could build something new from the broken pieces of what they had lost. Eleanor Smith did not make appointments. She arrived at Marvin's office on a Tuesday morning, with the quiet authority of someone who had once chosen the furniture in this room. Back when her husband ran the company and her son was still taking orders, Barbara tried to intercept her at reception. But Eleanor moved past with the smile that was not quite a smile, the one that made assistants step aside reflexively. Marvin looked up from the engineering drawings Sarah had asked him to review something about bridges and weight distribution to find his mother standing in his doorway holding a leather portfolio that meant business. "We need to talk," Eleanor said, closing the door behind her without asking. "I'm working. You're looking at a child's homework." She set the portfolio on his desk with a soft thud. "Which proves my point. You've lost perspective." Marvin closed the folder slowly, giving himself time to breathe through the old, instinctive urge to defer. "What do you want, Mother?" "To protect you from making a mistake that will cost this family everything." She opened the portfolio, revealing a document thick enough to be a novel. "I had Mitchell draw this up. It's comprehensive. Custody agreements, financial boundaries, paternity contingencies. Everything Evelyn Lopez needs to sign before this situation becomes legally complicated." He did not touch the papers. "Evelyn is not a situation. She's a woman with 2 children, and no prenuptial agreement from your marriage," Eleanor said crisply. "That makes her a liability. These documents protect your assets, establish clear support parameters, and ensure she cannot claim additional funds beyond what's reasonable." "Reasonable," Marvin repeated flatly. "Monthly support, education trusts, medical coverage," she continued as if reading from a checklist. "All very generous, but capped. No access to Smith & Associates, no joint accounts, no claim to property acquired during your separation. Mitchell says it's ironclad." Marvin stood, putting the desk between them. "Did it occur to you that I might not want it to be ironclad? That I might actually want Evelyn and my daughters in my life without contracts and contingencies?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that concerns me. You've been playing house for 2 months and suddenly you're ready to hand over the keys to everything your grandfather built? I'm not handing over anything. I'm being a father." "You're being sentimental," she corrected. "You barely know these children. You've had what, a dozen supervised visits, some pizza nights? And now you're ready to restructure your entire life around a woman who's already proven she'll walk away when things get difficult?" "She walked away because I chose work over her," Marvin said quietly. Because I let you manage my personal life like another portfolio. Because I was exactly the kind of man who would need a document like this. Eleanor picked up the contract, holding it out like an offering. Then be smarter now. Sign this. Have her sign it. Protect yourself. No. The word landed between them like something breakable. Excuse me. I'm not signing it. I'm not asking Evelyn to sign it. And I'm asking you to leave. Eleanor set the document down carefully, her movements precise and controlled. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Take the afternoon, review the terms with your own attorney, and we'll discuss this rationally tomorrow. There's nothing to discuss. Marvin walked to the door and opened it. My family is not a contract negotiation. My daughters are not assets to protect against their own mother, and you are not welcome in decisions about how I raise them. I am your mother, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to something cold and sharp. I have been protecting this family since before you were born. You don't dismiss me from a conversation about its future. I'm not dismissing you from a conversation, Marvin said. I'm removing you from control you were never entitled to. You hid my children from me. You interfered with my marriage. You've spent 6 years making decisions about my life without my knowledge or consent. To protect you. To control me, he corrected. And I let you because it was easier than setting boundaries. But that ends today. Eleanor gathered the portfolio with sharp, angry movements. If you do this, if you allow that woman unrestricted access to your life and your finances, you will regret it. She will take everything. And I will not be there to fix it when this family loyalty experiment collapses. Then don't be, Marvin said. They stared at each other across a distance that had nothing to do with the physical space between them. He saw, perhaps for the first time, that his mother was genuinely afraid, not of losing control, of being irrelevant, of watching her carefully constructed legacy choose love over strategy. You're making a mistake, she said finally. Maybe, he acknowledged. But it's my mistake to make. Eleanor walked past him into the hall, her heels clicking precise and measured on the marble floor. She paused at the elevator, back straight, posture perfect even in dismissal. When this falls apart, she said without turning around, don't expect me to rebuild what you've destroyed. The elevator doors closed on her rigid silhouette. Marvin stood in the empty hallway, his hands shaking slightly, adrenaline making his pulse loud in his ears. Barbara appeared at his elbow, holding out a cup of coffee he had not asked for. That looked difficult, she said diplomatically. It was overdue, Marvin replied. He walked back into his office and picked up the contract his mother had left behind. For a moment he considered reading it, learning exactly how she had tried to reduce his family to bullet points and contingency clauses. Then he fed the entire thing into the shredder beside his desk, watching it transform into strips too small to reconstruct. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Can you help with my fractions homework tonight? Mom says they're hard, but you're good at numbers. Marvin smiled and typed back. I'll be there at 6. Bring your math book and extra patience. Outside his window, the city glittered in afternoon light. Somewhere out there, his mother was probably already calling her attorney, strategizing her next move, unable to accept that some things could not be controlled or optimized or protected into submission. But Marvin had fractions to explain and pizza to order and 2 little girls who were starting to call him dad when they forgot to be careful. He would choose them every time. The Smith Foundation annual charity luncheon was Eleanor's masterpiece. 200 guests, $10,000 a plate, crystal chandeliers reflecting off polished silver. Senators mingled with tech moguls. The guest list read like a Forbes power ranking. Marvin had attended every year since he was 18, trained to smile and shake hands and represent the family legacy with appropriate gravitas. This year, he had invited Evelyn. She stood beside him in a simple navy dress, visibly uncomfortable among the designer gowns and political handlers. He kept one hand at the small of her back, a quiet anchor in the sea of strangers who assessed her with calculating eyes. Your mother is staring, Evelyn murmured. She's been staring since we arrived, Marvin said. Ignore her. But ignoring Eleanor Smith at her own event was like ignoring a gathering storm. She worked the room with surgical precision, pausing at each table, her smile sharp and controlled. Marvin watched her trajectory and realized, too late, that she was circling toward them. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor's voice cut through the ambient conversation as she took the microphone at the podium. Before we begin our keynote address, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge some special guests. Marvin's stomach dropped. My son Marvin has brought a companion today, Eleanor continued, her tone perfectly gracious and utterly venomous. Evelyn Lopez, his former wife. Some of you may not know that Miss Lopez recently reappeared in Marvin's life with rather extraordinary news. 2 daughters, twins, in fact. The room went silent. 200 faces turned toward their table. Evelyn's hand found his under the tablecloth, her grip tight enough to hurt. Family is complicated, Eleanor said, her smile never wavering, particularly when financial considerations become entangled with emotional ones, which is why I've prepared a small gesture of protection for everyone involved. She produced a manila envelope from the podium, holding it up like evidence. A simple agreement. Financial support for the children, of course. Education trusts. Medical care. Everything a responsible father would provide. And in return, clear legal boundaries to ensure that past mistakes don't jeopardize future stability. Marvin stood slowly, his chair scraping loud in the frozen silence. Miss Lopez, Eleanor addressed Evelyn directly, her voice projecting across the ballroom. If you could join me at the podium, we can handle this quickly and return to our program. Stay here, Marvin said quietly to Evelyn. Then he walked toward the front of the room, each step feeling like moving through deep water. Eleanor extended the envelope as he approached. Marvin, darling, help me explain to Miss Lopez that this is simply good sense. He took the envelope from her hand. The room held its breath, then Marvin tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed in the silent ballroom. He tore it again, and again. Let the pieces fall like snow onto the pristine white tablecloth. There will be no agreement, he said, his voice carrying without the microphone. No contracts, no boundaries protecting my money from my family. Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. Marvin, this is not the time. This is exactly the time. He turned to face the audience. 200 of the most powerful people in the city watching him destroy his mother's carefully orchestrated intervention. Most of you know me as the CEO of Smith & Associates, as my grandfather's heir, as someone who prioritizes business above everything else. He found Evelyn in the crowd, still seated at their table, her face pale. What you don't know is that 6 years ago, I missed the most important news of my life because I had built a world where people like my mother controlled who could reach me. My ex-wife tried to tell me she was pregnant. I never got the message. I spent 6 years building an empire while my daughters grew up without me. The silence was absolute. Even Eleanor had gone still. 2 months ago, I met them, Barbara and Sarah, 6 years old, brilliant and funny and perfect, and every single day since then, I have had to prove I deserve to be their father. His voice roughened. My mother thinks that makes me vulnerable. That love is a weakness to protect against with legal documents and financial contingencies. He turned back to Eleanor. You were wrong. About Evelyn. About what matters. About what kind of man I want to be. Marvin, please. Eleanor said quietly, urgently. You're embarrassing the family. I'm saving it, he said. Which is why, effective immediately, I'm resigning as CEO of Smith & Associates. The room erupted. Whispers became exclamations. Someone dropped a glass. Eleanor gripped the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I've appointed Richard Chen as interim CEO, Marvin continued over the noise. He's more than qualified. The company will be fine. Better than fine. It will be run by someone whose entire life isn't consumed by it. He walked back toward Evelyn, who had stood, her eyes bright with something that might have been tears. The only legacy I care about, he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, is the one sitting at that table. Everything else is just money. And money, I've learned, is the least valuable thing I own. He reached Evelyn and took her hand. Let's go home. Let's go home. They walked out together, past tables of stunned guests, past photographers whose cameras had suddenly found the most interesting story of the year, past his mother standing frozen at the podium with the shredded remains of her control scattered at her feet. In the lobby, away from the stairs, Evelyn stopped him. You just resigned, she said. In front of everyone. I did. Your mother will never forgive you. I know. The press is going to have a field day. Probably. He touched her face gently. Are you angry? She laughed, the sound shaky. I'm terrified. You just blew up your entire life. I blew up the wrong life, he corrected. I'm building the right one. Evelyn kissed him then. In the marble lobby with the string quartet still playing faintly from the ballroom, with his old world crumbling behind them, and something fragile and new taking shape in its place. Let's go get the girls, she whispered against his mouth. Take them to the park. Be impossibly normal. Best offer I've had all day, Marvin said. They walked out into the winter sunlight, leaving the Smith Foundation luncheon to collapse into scandal without them. Somewhere, his phone was probably exploding with calls from board members and reporters and damage control specialists. He left it on silent and drove toward the life he should have been living all along. The house was nothing like the penthouse. Marvin had sold that glass monument to ambition 3 weeks after the luncheon, trading 40 floors of city views for a 3-bedroom colonial, in a neighborhood where children rode bikes on the sidewalk, and people knew their neighbors' names. It had a backyard, a porch, a kitchen that had actually been used for cooking. This is really yours? Barbara asked, spinning in the living room with her overnight bag clutched to her chest. Not just visiting yours? Really mine, Marvin confirmed. Yours too, when you're here. Your room is upstairs. Second door on the left. The twins thundered up the stairs, their excitement echoing through walls that had never heard children before. Evelyn stood in the doorway with the caution of someone entering a space she had not yet decided to trust. You bought a house, she said. I bought a home, he corrected. Or at least I'm trying to. The lawn needs work. The dishwasher makes a concerning noise, but it's 5 minutes from your apartment and the elementary school, and the backyard is big enough for a swing set. She walked slowly through the space, taking in the mismatched furniture he had chosen himself, without a decorator or a price tag consideration. The bookshelves already filling with science kits and chapter books, the refrigerator covered in Barbara's artwork, transplanted from her apartment with careful permission. You really did it, Evelyn said quietly. You walked away. I did. He came to stand beside her at the window, overlooking the backyard. The board thinks I had a breakdown. My mother hasn't spoken to me in 3 weeks. The Wall Street Journal called it the most dramatic executive resignation of the decade. Any regrets? Not one. He turned to face her. I spent 40 years building the wrong thing, Eve. I'm not making that mistake again. Upstairs, something thudded. Barbara's voice drifted down. Sarah says we can't both have the bed by the window, but I called it first. We'll figure it out, Marvin called back. Then, quieter, to Evelyn. I have no idea what I'm doing. The parenting books contradict each other. I burned frozen pizza last week. Yesterday Sarah asked me about death and I panicked and started explaining tax law. Evelyn laughed. A real one. The kind he had not heard since they were young and broke and happy. Tax law? I was grasping, he admitted. Barbara eventually told me I was bad at feelings and made me watch a movie about loss with her. A cartoon fixed what I couldn't. You're learning, Evelyn said. That's what matters. I'm terrified, he said honestly. Every day I'm terrified. I'll mess this up. That I'll slip back into old habits. That I'll lose them again. Then don't, she said simply. Keep choosing them. Keep showing up. Keep asking Barbara about her feelings and helping Sarah with science projects and burning pizza because you're trying. Is that enough? Evelyn reached up and touched his face. Her hand warm against his cheek. You gave up everything in front of 200 people. You bought a house with a yard. You're learning that tax law is not appropriate grief counseling. Yes, Marvin, it's enough. He caught her hand, held it. I want more than co-parenting. I want us. Not the us we were, but the us we could be, if you're willing to try. She was quiet for a long moment, studying him with the careful assessment of someone who had been hurt before and refused to make the same mistake twice. I loved you once, she said finally, before the ambition ate everything, before your mother and the money and the divorce. I loved you so much it scared me. And now? Now I'm watching you become someone I could love again, she said. Someone who tears up contracts, who stays up late building seismographs, who calls himself terrified but shows up anyway. Is that a yes? She smiled, tentative and real. It's a maybe that's leaning heavily toward yes. Ask me again in 6 months when you haven't run back to the penthouse. I sold the penthouse, he reminded her. Then ask me in 6 months when you're still here, still trying, still choosing us over everything else. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I can do 6 months. I can do 60 years. Big talk, she murmured. Let's start with the weekend. Upstairs, the argument about the window bed had resolved into laughter. Marvin heard water running, the sounds of children settling into a new space with the adaptability only 6-year-olds possessed. Stay, he said. Tonight. Not just drop them off. Stay for dinner. Stay for the chaos. Stay, and let me prove this isn't temporary. Evelyn pulled back enough to look at him. Whatever she saw in his expression made her decision. Okay, she said. But I'm ordering the pizza. You're banned from the oven. Completely fair. They stood in the warm light of the living room, not quite together but no longer apart, while their daughters claimed their space in the rooms above. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into evening. Porch lights flickered on. A dog barked. Someone laughed. It was ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of life Marvin had spent 40 years avoiding because it seemed too small, too simple, too far beneath what he was supposed to achieve. Now, it felt like everything. Evelyn's hand found his, their fingers tangling with familiar ease. And for the first time since the Christmas gala, Marvin understood what he had actually been searching for in all those boardrooms and quarterly reports. Not success, not legacy, not the empire his grandfather built or the fortune his mother protected. Just this. The sound of children laughing upstairs, the woman he loved giving him a second chance, a home that measured wealth in pizza nights and science projects, and the simple, extraordinary act of showing up. He had finally built something worth keeping. The Christmas tree touched the ceiling, slightly crooked despite Marvin's 3 attempts to straighten it. Sarah had declared it perfect anyway, citing some principle about natural asymmetry that Barbara had immediately disputed. Their ornaments hung in chaotic clusters, none of the professional symmetry his mother's decorator would have insisted upon. It was the most beautiful tree Marvin had ever seen. Dad, the cookies are ready, Barbara called from the kitchen, the word slipping out naturally now. No longer the careful test it had been 6 months ago. He found both girls standing on step stools, decorating sugar cookies with the kind of enthusiastic excess that meant more frosting ended up on the counter than the actual treats. Evelyn supervised from the table, the diamond on her left hand catching the warm kitchen light every time she gestured. She caught him staring and smiled. The private kind meant only for him. Stop lurking and help, she said. Barbara's trying to build architectural structures. Sarah's conducting a physics experiment with icing consistency. These aren't experiments, Sarah protested. They're prototypes. My mistake, Evelyn said solemnly. Marvin rolled up his sleeves and joined them, accepting the piping bag Barbara thrust at him. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. Soft and steady, blanketing the neighborhood in the kind of picture-perfect holiday scene that used to feel staged. Now it just felt like home. They ate dinner around the table he had built last spring, Barbara narrating her school play while Sarah explained tectonic shifts with the kind of passion most people reserved for sports teams. The chaos of overlapping stories and interrupted explanations and laughter that came easily should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like the life he had been searching for, without knowing what he was missing. After dessert, after the dishes were cleared and the twins were arguing about which Christmas movie to watch, Marvin stood and gently tapped his water glass with a spoon. Speech, Evelyn warned, but she was smiling. Short one, he promised. Barbara, Sarah, come here for a second. They scrambled over, curious and alert. He knelt down so he could look them in the eyes. These 2 small humans who had rewritten his entire understanding of what mattered. 1 year ago, I saw you at a Christmas party, he began. I didn't know you existed. And then suddenly, you did. And everything I thought I understood about my life turned out to be wrong. Wrong how? Sarah asked. I thought success meant money. Buildings, with my name on them, people recognizing me in restaurants. He glanced at Evelyn, who had moved to stand behind the girls, her hands resting on their shoulders. But this year I learned what actual wealth looks like. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 small envelopes, handing one to each twin. What is it? Barbara asked, already tearing hers open. Open them, he said. Inside each envelope was a certificate, official and embossed, declaring their legal name change. Barbara Lopez Smith and Sarah Lopez Smith. Sarah read hers slowly, her lips moving over the words. Barbara looked up at him with wide eyes. "We have your name now," she whispered. "You always had it," Marvin said, his throat tight. Now the paperwork finally caught up. Lopez Smith. Sarah tested it out. Both together, Evelyn confirmed, her voice unsteady. Barbara launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck with enough force to nearly knock him over. Sarah followed a beat later, more careful but no less fierce. Marvin held them both. These two miracles he had almost missed, and felt the final pieces of his old life dissolve completely. When they finally pulled back, Barbara's eyes were bright. "Does this mean we're really your family now? Like, officially?" "You were always my family," he said. "But yes, officially. Can we still watch the movie?" Sarah asked, practical even in emotional moments. "Absolutely," Evelyn said, laughing through tears she was pretending not to shed. They settled onto the couch, the four of them arranged in a pile of blankets and limbs, the movie playing mostly unwatched because Barbara kept asking questions and Sarah kept fact-checking the plot. Evelyn's head rested on Marvin's shoulder, her hand finding his. The engagement ring a quiet promise between them. Through the window, the snow continued falling, covering the yard where the swing set stood waiting for summer. The house was warm. The tree glowed, and somewhere in the chaos of cookie crumbs and discarded wrapping paper and children's laughter, Marvin realized he had finally discovered what his grandfather's fortune had never been able to buy. Not power, not status, not buildings that touched the sky or portfolios that spanned continents. Just this moment, his daughters using his name, the woman he loved, choosing him again. A Christmas morning that measured success in frosting-covered counters and crooked trees, and the simple, extraordinary gift of being present. "Dad," Barbara whispered during a quiet moment in the film. "Yeah, this is the best Christmas ever." He kissed the top of her head, breathed in the scent of sugar cookies and children's shampoo, and felt his heart expand to hold more joy than he had ever imagined possible. "It really is," he agreed. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its holiday silence. Inside, the Lopez Smith family celebrated the first of many Christmases to come, their laughter drifting through the warm rooms of a house that had finally become a home. Marvin had spent 40 years building an empire. But in the end, the only legacy that mattered fit perfectly on this couch, calling him Dad, and choosing him every single day. That was the only wealth he would ever need. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.